Now that the defense has rested its case without calling a single witness, including Brian Walshe, we wanted to know where things go from here. So let's turn it over to Boston 25 legal expert Peter Ellikin joining us to break things down. Peter, good morning. I think everyone in the newsroom was surprised when they heard he would not be testifying. What do you think?
Throw a blanket over me. I am in shock. But now we have the evidence has come out that he cut up his wife's body and disposed of it. And yet the jury will not hear any explanation whatsoever that he's justifying it or I didn't kill or anything like that. However, he does have very, very talented, smart lawyers, and there's got to be some kind of good reasoning behind this. I'm only speculating, but what I believe is that we've heard the prosecution's case, and they talked all about getting rid of the body, but they never, he's charged with first-degree murder, which is, usually premeditated, intentional killing of somebody. We didn't hear of any that he intended to kill her. We didn't hear anything that it was premeditated. He was certainly scrambling, in the middle of the night to try to find out online how to get rid of a body and all that. And we didn't hear any evidence that he killed her. So on the one hand, and that's not the prosecution's fault that they couldn't give that. They don't have the body. But so on the one hand, we have that they never gave any evidence that he killed her. And on the other hand, is the jury just going to say, look, we can't get past, this is a hard sell. We can't get past the idea of why would you have a loved one who suddenly, who died, and you're cutting up their body and all that, and you didn't have anything to do with harming them or killing them. So that's sort of where the battle lines are drawn. That number one, on one side, there's no real evidence presented that he killed her, and on the other hand, can the jury get by the idea that he was disposing the body like that and lying to the police about it?
So hearing you go through that, do you think he did himself harm or helped himself by not going on the stand?
There must have been a lot of calculation going in that, and I just don't know how it would have gone. I mean, normally we don't put people on the stand, and it's extremely rare. This was a rare case where I was like everybody else. I thought this was going to be the exception, and I think only when we get the verdict will we really find out, and maybe they interview the jurors. We'll find out whether this was the best move that the defense could have done in a very difficult case or not.
So the defense also rested its case without calling a single witness, including Walshe. What do you make of that?
Well, again, I don't know how many other witnesses there would have been, because if the story was, if the defense was ever going to be he didn't kill her, he's the only one there. There were no witnesses, et cetera. And we don't have a body, so we can't give, scientific evidence to say that it was a natural death or whatever. So I think he was probably just about the only person who could have testified here. And other than, I'm thinking this has happened so fast. I guess if he had taken the stand and said, no, I didn't kill her, she spontaneously just died from an embolism or a heart attack or something like that, and then we would have had more experts come forward and say, yeah, that's possible. But then again, the medical examiner already stated that it is possible. It's a healthy young person usually doesn't die, out of the blue like that, but it is possible and it has happened. So I don't know that really there's anybody else who would have testified. And I think they must have weighed it and just said, look, the prosecution gave no evidence that he killed her, that it was premeditated, that it was intentional, anything like that. So maybe we should quit while we're ahead and just leave it out like that. And it is a calculated risk. But as I said, these are really very talented defense lawyers that he has, and they must have put a lot of thought into that. And so they must know what they're doing. But having said that, it still is a risk, and it's impossible to know really whether this was the best thing to do or not.
Peter, as you're talking, I'm also thinking it through with you. I'm thinking it wouldn't make sense for him to take the stand, because then that would open him to the prosecution asking him, okay, well, then why did you dismember your wife? Where is she? And I'm guessing they did not want to have to answer that question on the stand.
That is very possible. Yeah, he would have had to say something like, well, I panicked, or I thought I was going to get blamed because suddenly it's a healthy woman who just died and nobody would believe me. And it's hard to, put yourself in my position where you're suddenly panicking and emotional and at the last minute. And Yeah, he would have had to come up with something like that, and we don't know whether the jury would have bought that or not. Because the average juror, and this isn't a question you have to ask a so-called legal expert or an attorney. This is the average person. I could turn to the average non-lawyer, anybody out there, and say to them, gee, if you suddenly had a heartbreaking tragedy like that where suddenly a loved one suddenly died without any warning, would it have been your inclination, well, I better start getting a hacksaw and hatchet and start chopping them up into little pieces and getting rid of? I mean, that's kind of the question that everybody kind of has to weigh.
Well, Peter, I know that you will be following this closely, as we will. We always appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us in the car there.
Thank you.